Hello, puppies and kittens. On my series, why do you believe? The idea generally is that I argue with people that I think disagree with me, and I try to reason with them. And I always keep the expectation that it's possible that they might change my mind too, if there was any truth to what they're doing. And so far, to the best of my memory, that's only happened once. For example, I had somebody on who was promoting Marxism, and despite how, like, every creationist ever thinks that I'm a Marxist, no, it turns out I'm not. And the Marxist failed to convince me to join his side of the team. However, when it came to nihilism, I was rather surprised when somebody gives me the basic rundown of what a nihilist is, and I realized, well, that actually does apply to me, and it's not the negative connotation that I thought it was. So I'm speaking with that guy now, the one guy who managed to change my mind about that. And I haven't advertised that I'm a nihilist because every time I use a label at all, nobody knows what the fuck the label means. So it's pointless. I have to describe my position rather than give a label to it because everybody has their own definition of what they think the label means. So, Niall,
Hello.
uh, Niall wanted to come back and explain what was it? Embellishments, enhancements,
Well,
adaptations,
essentially,
modifications on your old position.
I've just essentially ran with it for much longer. When I first reached out to you, it was when I had gotten through the first initial stages of the implications. Essentially, like I had encountered the philosophy and realized that most people who purportedly hold to it themselves, and also most of the interpretation external to it of people whenever you hear the word, was that it's essentially synonymous with fatalism and pessimism, and that it's a belief in nothing, self-contradictory, or like a believing that all values are valueless, including that value, which is, like, again, self-redundant stuff. But the closest one that I saw was that reality is objectively meaningless. And thinking that, I thought, like, well, duh, but also no. And thinking that through led to realizing that meaning is, and only ever has been, a phenomena of minds. Like, it's subject dependent. To say objective meaning is inherently broken. It doesn't make any sense, because the only basis for the entire concept of meaning is minds themselves. And essentially, I've taken that and applied it to a lot more domains of thought. And also wanted to just discuss with you, as we talked before this, about the importance of just having an honest philosophy, and how, if you, like, science without philosophy is just disconnected data without a framework of interpretation, whereas philosophy without science is misguided and often rife with speculation and fantasy, subjective speculation and fantasy that has no regard for trying to comprehend objective reality. But yeah, that was the basis of it anyways. But yes, I wanted to talk about the importance of an honest philosophy and the concept of nihilism, more specifically the implications of nihilism when recognized as being a neutral realization.
Okay, so this is the problem I have with philosophical conversations. I have no idea what you just said.
Really? How so? Like, at what point? Like, I'm just saying, like, okay, so there. Let me just start from the start of the notes here. All right, let's roll with it. So, what is philosophy and why is it important? That's the first point, because that's relatively easy,
Please.
but also fundamentally difficult to many people. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I didn't want you to simplify it that much. I don't need to roll my eyes back in my head.
No. Like, I'm talking about the fundamentals of, like, how you organize your ideas relative to each other. Like, if you, like,
I
want to
think
cook
what
a
would be
meal.
more helpful is for those people who haven't seen the old discussion that we had, to give a summary definition of what nihilism is, how it is not what we've all been taught that it is. Like what was the joke from the Big
Yeah,
Lebowski? You say what you want about
they
the
believe in
National
nothing.
Socialists, the Nazis, or whatever, but at least it's an ethos, right? So
Yeah.
this, and you want to talk about, that thing, something nihilistic. The general notion that people have is when people say, "Oh, what's the point?" And it's the argument
That's
that
fatalism
Christians
and that's
often have.
pessimism. That isn't nihilism.
Yeah,
So
it's like
I'll make that distinction
it's
here.
like the lady that said it in that video with Ricky Gervais, when she says, "Well, if you know that your life is going to end, why not just kill yourself?" Which is utterly, You want to talk
absurd.
about pointless?
It's
Why the hell? This is the one life this is the one life we have. This is the one moment we have at existence. Why would you want to kill yourself? Well, there's no point in that. What it is I noticed that religious believers have this weird fixation with having a purpose, which
external to them
oddly
that they don't have to think about, or
they didn't come up with their purpose. They
it's
whatever
predefined,
the purpose.
prepackaged philosophy.
Right. They don't have a meaning of their life. They don't get to choose what meaning they want to apply to their lives. They want to pretend
Okay, so
that
we'll start there.
That they exist
there.
as a tool for some other entity to use them as fodder for whatever. And
because it gives them purpose that they don't have to question, because it gives them something that is prepackaged and easy to think about and easy to absorb, especially through repeated exposure, which is what childhood indoctrination is and what they aim to do. So once it's in there, it's just easy to hold on to, and all of their foundations of meaning reroute back to it, such that they don't have to think through each concept of meaning individually. It can just all reroute back to this simplistic concept. And if that simplistic concept isn't there, then, oh my God, I have to comprehend everything from the ground up. And that neurological undertaking is something that they don't want to do. That's why the theist problem with atheism. That's why the theist problem with atheism is fundamentally a problem with nihilism.
Granted, but somebody who imagines that, well, first of all, that they here's the first confusion. When they think that nothing can exist unless something somewhere said or wanted it to exist. So everything has to be an act of will. Everything.
We are creatures that operate with intent and will. Like most of the things that we do, at least on this level, we operate with intent and will. So we project that onto the universe and assume that if things got here, then they must have been created, because we are creator beings. We make things, we do things, we forge things. So we assume and project that outward because it's an easy answer to complex questions that they don't want to actually have to address. So when the theist problems with atheism being a problem with nihilism is essentially because when an atheist points out the fact that God is likely a psychological manifestation, not an actual external agent operating in reality, he confronts them with the reality that their foundation for a concept like morality, like beauty, right? All of it, essentially, every concept of meaning is all bound around this myth. So in challenging that, you're challenging them with the reality of nihilism, the reality that we are the meaning makers. We are the centers of the concept of meaning. We are the only and actual foundation in which it ever had a context. This is why the first thing they talk about when being confronted with atheist position are questions regarding to where to find meaning without God, or like, oh, how could I possibly even live, or how to be moral, the meaning of life, and so on and so on and so on. Many people pretend that God still exists, so they don't need to comprehend the implications of him not. Changing one's basemost belief is a massive psychological undertaking, as you
the very notion that life should have a meaning is completely incomprehensible to me.
What do you mean by that?
When somebody first brought up, when I was a child, I mean, I just never had this philosophy, like, I don't know, drilled into me. I was very fortunate that my family did not do, or they didn't believe in doing religious indoctrination on children. They thought it was the pearls before swine thing. What's the point of trying to teach a child what they can't understand?
Yeah.
So they didn't. And I'm very fortunate that my family were like this. They didn't want to teach me their religion until I reached what they arbitrarily determined to be the age of reason, which they decided was 8 years old. Oh, so on my 8th birthday, my mother walks in, and to celebrate my birthday, she walks in with a Bible and tells me that this is the absolute truth, and that I better read it and believe it. So, and my first birthday. Yeah, which was not the case at all. I mean, by the time I was 8 years old, I'd already been to second grade. I'd already seen books about dinosaurs, and one of them had a cladogram in it, and I could see how all of the different animals were related. Of course,
yeah,
goats are more closely related to sheep than they are to cattle, but they're all three of them more closely related to cattle than they are to pigs or to birds.
It's an example of bad philosophy, right? Refusing to interpret information that contradicts it. Like people don't want
so
to.
When I was told that to read Genesis, and that I will just absolutely believe it because it's the word of God and everything, my initial response was, no, it isn't. See what it says here? And so I'm pointing out the flaws in it, right? Now, but when you're inculcated from such a young age, from, like the old Jesuit saying, give me a child until they are 7 and I'll show you the man, that the child who's had this bombarded into them, who've been indoctrinated, inculcated, whatever, then they're told you have to believe this and you are forbidden to believe that, right? The belief system, required
Yeah.
beliefs, prohibited beliefs. They
Yeah.
lose the ability to critically analyze at least that one thing. And very often they don't even develop the ability it's so stunted that they
It
never
becomes a
develop
threat.
beyond that.
It
So
becomes a threat.
when
Like
I was
being
forced
becomes
when
a
I was
threat.
forced to read Genesis, I came away with the interpretation that this is all metaphorical. That's the only way that's the only truth that could exist in the story, was this as a metaphor. And I'll spare you in the interpretation that I had in it. I did this when I was 8. I did it again when I was 11. Both times they got the same interpretation and the same reaction. My grandfather, for example, told me, "Well, what is the meaning of life?" Like, the fuck does that got to do with any damn thing? That's not
Because
even a
that book
meaningful
is his center
sentence.
of meaning. Like, he needs a
It's like
meaning of life. He needs a simple concept to cling to. Most people do, because that's what they're told there should be. They're told that this concept of a meaning of life is a valid thing. So they're told that, okay, then this is my meaning of life. And if anyone critiques that, they're critiquing my entire ideology of meaning, my entire foundation for the concept of meaning.
so what I get out of this is like if there used to be the old fortune teller shtick about you shuffle the deck of tarot cards, or you read you spill out the chicken bones, or what is it, the tea leaves,
Yeah.
and then you interpret what they mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Arbitrarily
But
assigning
but
meaning
in
to
order
everything.
to say that the pattern in which the tea leaves have taken upon their falling, this is as random as you can make anything be.
But it's in here.
To
It's,
say
it's
that
like
this
pareidolia. It's like seeing faces in the sand.
to say that it means something is that it's when people say that life has meaning, they're talking about the tea leaves. It's equally silly. It's nonsense either way. Life doesn't have a meaning. We are just an emergent aspect of the universe, and unfortunately we're not dominant. There's very little of the universe that is alive. Very, very precious little that is alive, and the
Yes.
universe doesn't seem to be aware of us at all, and probably isn't going to remember us when we go.
Yeah. No, exactly. A lot of people don't want to come to terms with because nihilism is essentially about the objective subjective distinction. It's about the reality that there exists an external objective reality that encompasses and surrounds and from which subjects emerge. In fact, try defining a subject without an external framework in which for it to operate, like even a simulation, like, or anything. Like, you can't, it does, there's no way that you can posit it that is consistent. And pardon me, the objective is synonymous with reality, while subjectivity is synonymous with consciousness. So subjects are an emergent subset of objective phenomena. So nihilism is realizing that meaning is, pardon, I meant to. Okay,
These
so
people who say that if you don't believe in my basis, my faulty basis of belief, well, then you can't have logic, you can't have reason, you can't
this is
have
why I wanted
morality.
to start at
We
philosophy.
have all of these things, and we have solid explanations for why we have all of these things,
Okay, so how
but
you
none of them
support,
are this assumption of this mythical being that has nothing to do with
yes,
anything in reality.
but that just comes down to how you sort your ideas and thoughts and beliefs and experiences relative to one another. It comes down to your philosophy, and this is why honest philosophy is such an important thing, because that's your fundamentals. That's like your angle of approach to ideas. And if your philosophy is broken, then any information you're subsequently exposed to is going to be interpreted through that broken framework. That's why something like theology is inherently broken, because it's built on the assumption of God exists, and all of our logic from here on in is going to try to rationalize everything in that interpretation that God exists. That's why theology from the ground up is fundamentally a broken philosophy and a dishonest philosophy, because it's built on confirmation bias. It's essentially an entire philosophy of reaffirming something that has no, like, you're not starting from the right axioms, you're not starting from the right ground. Honest philosophy is more like what I would call realism, which is realism would be seen as the perpetual attempt to align one's beliefs with what is most likely true of reality. So it's what you're doing all the time. It's what I aspire to do all the time. Understanding that reality is what it is, independent of what's believed about it. Whereas faith is the position of, I believe what I want to believe because I want to believe it. And these two philosophies are diametrically opposed. I would call this the core dichotomy of realism, because although it's a spectrum, there is definite ends to it, where you're either seeking to reaffirm the things that you really want to be true about reality, or you're seeking to understand reality as it is, independent of anything that you might want to be true about it. And where one falls on that spectrum determines a lot of subsequent realizations and interpretations of information and opinions that they're exposed to, and ideas that they're exposed to, and experiences that they have, because their foundational philosophy is the lens through which they interpret the information that they encounter. That's essentially why I think philosophy is so important, because it's how you arrange your ideas relative to one another.
I just want to say that when you first began to say this, and I told you then that I had no idea what you were even saying. I had it on mute because my dogs were going off. I honestly didn't hear a word you were saying. I just guessed that that it was probably incomprehensible, maybe to the audience, just because of how fast you were speaking.
No, it was like that. It was like bam, bam, bam. No, I got it. I'm on this. Okay, so let's.
But I fear that your explanation is not going to reach, but the people that I want to reach, and I know they don't watch my videos anyway. I mean, the audience that I would love to be able to reach, yeah, they don't even pay attention. I would love to hear these people who say that without their belief in God, then I can't have morality, that I have no basis for logic. I would love to have an actual conversation to show where my basis for morality is and where theirs isn't, where they actually don't have a basis of morality at all. What are you, a dog that you will only do something when you know the owner isn't watching? That's not morality.
Yes,
understanding why you don't do that, that's morality. See, like with a dog will figure out that it will get in trouble when it does this thing, not if.
Yes.
The concept of if doesn't come up. When. So if the only reason you haven't attacked that bird, whatever, eaten that duck or whatever it is, or chewed up the newspaper, the only reason you haven't done these things is because you know the master's watching, you're not moral. That's not morality at all.
Well, it's forgetting the fact that the concept of morality is like based in realities of our conditions, like objective realities of our subjective conditions, and the fact that both of us operate a similar subjective field. Like we have what I would refer to as a high degree of intersubjective similarity. Like, for instance, the sounds that I'm making right now are forming in your brain meaning that I wish to communicate across the void using objective conditions. But understanding the fact that you and I would both not like our hands to be placed on the table and smashed with a sledgehammer into pieces, like that visceral reaction that thought provokes us is essentially the basis for the concept of morality. The common struggle, as Hitchens referred to it, the fact that we share an objective reality and we share objective conditions, even though we're each trapped in our own subjective frameworks and subjective localized pockets. Like, there are aspects of objective reality that are shared, and we would equally like to operate within this objective framework within while experiencing the least amount of suffering and while prospering to the greatest extent that we can.
I had a discussion with a professor of philosophy at a seminary university. And yes, he was so very pompous because he is a professor of philosophy. Don't you?
Oh yes, he knows everything.
Just the arrogance was dripping.
Yeah,
but this guy told me that there's no such thing, that there is no objective reality. He said there's no such thing as a fact. So when I say that the truth is what the facts are, we can't say that something is true unless we can show the truth of it, right? Because if you say something's true and you don't have a way of knowing that it's true, that's a fundamental falsehood. You should not say something is true unless you know that it is true, unless you can show that it's true. Because how do you know if you can't show it, right? But his philosophy was that I have my reality and he has his, and in his, I can't prove him wrong, not about anything, because that would rely on a fact, and there can't be a fact because reality is entirely subjective. You make up your reality and he makes up his, and I'm a figment of his imagination and he of mine.
So nihilism highlights solipsism and external world skepticism like that as being inherently absurd, seeing as there's no conceivable framework one could posit in which subjects emerge in isolation. As I mentioned earlier, and how we obviously have commonalities and like there's patterns to the shit. Like, there's not going to be a monkey hopping out of my wall. Like, it's very unlikely. Like, I can't say it with 100% certainty, but there's very unlikely that a monkey's just going to pop out of the drywall. And like,
let me just help you out here.
And patterns to this.
We can't say that anything is possible because there are many things that are not possible.
Exactly.
And when we talk about the possibilities of remote remote possibilities. So yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my ass, but you know what? That's not going to happen either.
Exactly.
That's
It's about degrees of certainty and degrees of likelihood. And at a certain point, the degrees of certainty get so high that you may as well just say it's not going to happen. Because to talk about like
that becomes impossible. The cow cannot
exactly.
jump over the moon.
Yes.
Metaphorically, from a perspective, maybe,
Well,
but not
truth is only ever a matter
literally.
of degrees of certainty. So as we understand more about more, our margins of error narrow in, but rarely do they like make dramatic jumps to entirely different categories that come out of nowhere and break the consistency of observed reality. Like or like violate every single understanding of every single field all at once. Like gigantic things like that are so unlikely to happen as to consider them impossible. But the academic philosophy bit I wanted to address because that's important. The fact that academic philosophy is more a history of, dominated by an everything is equally likely to be correct and no one can know approach that allows for the staving off of the mutually assured destruction of delusions that so many people hold. Because if you address the fundamental issues and if you teach people pardon me, how to reason, how to think critically, then all of a sudden these treasured delusions evaporate and explode. That's why when you have Muslims arguing with Christians or Christians arguing with other Christians, they never address the fundamental issues. They always address like interpretations of scripture or like surface level things, and then they'll never address the core fallacies of it because to do so would cause it all to explode. So essentially, academic philosophy is dominated by that approach, and it allows. But by enforcing logical standards, you essentially make it a organization that people go to have their beliefs changed, and that wouldn't stand in a culture like today, because foundational opinions and beliefs affect all established around them. And pardon me.
When I argue with believers, they tend to redefine everything and they misdefine everything.
Yes,
So
but without
I would
consistency.
have, yeah, I would have realized that I was an atheist when I was a child if they'd
Had it
been
been
honest
explained to you.
about what the definition was. But
Yeah.
what they gave me for atheism, for nihilism, essentially the same thing. They say you believe in nothing, which means that instead of having a belief in nothing, I do not have a belief that is based on faith. That would be the correct way to say that. And so I didn't want to believe things just because I wanted to believe them. I always accepted that there's an objective reality that is not of mine manufacturer, that I am part of the reality. It's not part of me. That reality is not an aspect of my mind, but there's other people who, as you said, they don't want their belief systems disproved. They want to be able to say, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know, so that they can say,
No one
I
can
know.
know. They want to say no
Right.
one can know, and my personal beliefs are equivalent to any objectively verifiable belief, and all beliefs are
But
equivalent.
while they say that no one can know, they are also saying, I know there's a God. I know for absolute fact there's a. No, you fucking don't. And if
Yeah.
nobody can know anything, then why are you sitting here telling us that you know everything? Right? Or the
So
presuppositionalist who says that you can't know anything unless you know everything. And if you don't know everything, then you know nothing unless you know someone who knows everything.
it's
But if you yourself don't know anything, if you don't know everything, then if you don't know everything, then how do you know if you know someone who knows everything?
this is reason themselves into a hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absurd. People struggle with the concept of nihilism because the responsibility, the epistemic responsibility that it takes to reform their beliefs in a correspondence with reality is more effort than they are likely to be willing to put into it. But I wanted to sidetrack into how, since we covered the fact that nihilism is fundamentally about the objective subjective distinction, and how all phenomena of meaning, all ideas of meaning, of morality, all come back to like us subjects. Like there's no reason to ever call like objective meaning, objective reality, what is the meaning of life. All of that is fundamentally broken because it forgets the fact that we're the meaning machines. We are the what is it? We are the music makers, and we are the dreamer of the dreams. We are the centers from which these things manifest. We are
Since you're
subjects
going
are
to quote Willy Wonka, let me just use Willy Wonka against the believers one other way. You should never ever doubt what no one is sure about.
Yes.
Which is my favorite Willy Wonka line, because it tracks directly to these people who have all of this confidence in what is really baseless speculation, but you're absolutely confident about it nonetheless.
Yeah, the confidence of ignorance is astounding. The Dunning-Kruger, but more than that, they're more confident in the things that they just want to be true, and they think that wanting it to be true and believing it really hard is equivalent to knowing it's true, because they don't have any like even fundamental foundational concept of epistemology, like how we can know things and how like things can be known and what equates to knowledge and what doesn't. And they think that beliefs equate to knowledge, and your knowledge are beliefs and my knowledge are beliefs. So everything, like, you can just believe whatever you want to believe and leave me alone. Don't challenge my beliefs. And by challenging their beliefs, they think that they can then challenge yours, but they do it by assuming that you believe the same flaws and shit that they do. So they attack their own position while pretending to be attacking you and not actually like getting anywhere, but exposing their flaws.
There is a whole lot of projection wherein the people that I argue with do seem to be pretending that I am them and they are me. And
Yeah.
what you were just saying, that this describes, like, even like their best people. I mean, many people have told me that William Lane Craig, many Christians have told me that William Lane Craig is their best guy. And yet, Bill Craig said that he believes, just because he thinks it would be really neat if it were true, and if there's a 1 in 100 possibility that it could be true, or 1 in 1,000, I can't remember what number he used, but if there's any, if there's a 1 in whatever chance that it is true, then that'd be super fucking wonderful. And so he's going to say that it's true.
So he's going to go all in on that one.
Yeah. So he's absolutely good. He's going to be absolutely convinced for literally no reason at all, but because he likes that fantasy, and he's going to make believe it. And that's it. And that's
I believe
all,
what I want to believe
else.
because I want to believe it. I believe what I want to believe because I want to believe it, and you can't say anything about it, because I believe what I want to believe because I want to believe it. I don't believe what I believe because it's most likely to be true and because I have good reason for it and because it maps onto the evidence of reality around me. No. It's what I want to believe, and you can't criticize that because you're mean if you do so. You're a bad person. Why are you like? Because I don't know how to think about morality. I don't know how to think about meaning. I don't know how to think about beauty or awe or how I should treat people or how I should like structure my life without this concept that I've been told I should attach my meaning concept to from a young age. This should be the foundation of my concept of meaning. And when you challenge that, you're exposing me to the reality that it's actually on me, and I don't like that.
I would prefer not to use the word believe like ever again, because my position is not a matter of beliefs. My position is it's an investigation.
Honest philosophies try to have their beliefs align with reality. Everyone has beliefs about things. Like, I believe that if I crack the egg before putting it into the frying pan, I'll have a better omelet than if I just splash it on there. Like beliefs are just like how you structure thoughts. And
I get that, but there's a context.
To respond to reality.
There's a problem with context, and believers, people who describe themselves as believers, they mean make believe.
Oh yeah,
they are going to convince themselves of a thing regardless whether it's true or not. What
yes,
I
it's
do
a definitely important distinction.
What I do instead is I weigh multiple hypotheses, and I can continue to weigh even in the highest degree of confidence. I can still weigh multiple hypotheses.
That's why I don't believe in evolution.
Not necessarily commit to any of them. If I don't believe X, it doesn't mean that I believe in the alternate opposite.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Well, you can hold a position of non-belief.
Maybe this one is supported, this one isn't, or this one isn't as well, or whatever. Either could be possible. The analogy that I like to use is, maybe that's true and maybe it isn't.
There you go.
But I'm not convinced either way. Not being convinced that this is true does not mean being convinced that it is false. I have argued with actual philosophers, self-styled, self-proclaimed philosophers, who do not understand that you can not believe either of two conflicting propositions, and that doesn't mean that you necessarily have chosen one and hate the other.
Yeah, that's because theology has crept into academic philosophy and more or less taken over. I wanted to just add a note to that. I don't believe in evolution. I understand it to be a reality. So that's my play on that. Like, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in evolution. I just understand it to be a very likely mechanism by which species diversify over time that explains the diversification of life that we see around us. Like, it's not about whether or not I believe it. It's about whether or not you understand it to be true and you understand the reasoning behind it or not.
Likewise, and conversely, I don't believe in Big Bang cosmology. I don't even like Big Bang cosmology, but I accept that it is the dominant theory, that it is the most supported. I wish there was something else. I wish there was something that was better supported, and I'm hoping that maybe
Was that?
our understanding will improve over time. But until then, I am in no position to overturn Big Bang cosmology just because I
Yeah,
don't particularly like it.
that has nothing to do with that. That's another fundamental philosophical thing is that people make the mistake of tying up their beliefs with the things that they want to be true and tying in their emotions with them and believing the thing like if they don't want something to be true or they don't like the implications of the reality of something, then they pretend that there's no reason to believe it. They don't expose themselves to the evidence for it, and they don't expose themselves to the reasoning behind it. They just avoid that at all costs because they really don't want it to be true. So that's another foundational reason as to why honest philosophy and intellectual honesty is such an important thing to emphasize and to teach, and why critical thinking skills are necessary to develop. Because if you have a foundationally broken philosophy that like is more, you're controlled more by your emotions than you are in control of your emotions, then you're most likely to just be misled by organizations that are seeking to mislead you, or belief systems that have unfortunately already latched themselves onto you as you grew up.
To me, it has always been a matter of whether you care what the truth is.
Yes,
If
that's
your
exactly it.
whole if
The
your
core
whole
dichotomy
belief
of realism.
perspective, if
Yes.
every hello doggy,
Like, do you want to
if
understand what's
everything
real?
about your belief is designed to protect the belief from being disproved,
Guess
that
what?
implies to me that you already know that it's not supported and is not likely true.
That's
Now,
why the concept of blasphemy is absurd. Sorry, go ahead.
my position is if I hold something to be true and it's not,
Correct
then
me.
I've been fooled into believing something. I don't want to be fooled into believing anything that is not evidently true. So people will often threaten me in like a debate format as if it's a WWE match. You know, I would destroy you in a debate.
Destroy your
Okay.
arguments.
If what I hold to be true is not true, I
Tell me.
want you to
Yes.
disprove it, because then I will have been wrong up to this moment. And thanks to you, dear friend, I'm not wrong any longer. So I cannot be threatened by any of the idiots who think that they're bringing their belief system to attack what they think wrongly is my belief system. And so I am effortlessly defeating all of these idiots because they come with all of this armor, all of this armament, and I have no armor. It's just that there's
There's
nothing.
nothing to hit.
Exactly.
Oh shit! I lost my point. Shit. It was a good point too. The fact that believers typically attack. Pardon me. Can you? No, I lost it. Okay, moving on. My
How old are
partner.
you?
I am 26, I think. Sorry, I don't pay too
Okay,
much.
I'm well, I'm twice your age. I have excuses for when I have these senior moments.
I have anxiety. Like I'm running the loop of you running my loop. Like there's a feedback loop of being perceived by someone else that always has the potential to mess me up.
No worries, no worries. All right, so
uh,
the idea that I had when I was first talking to you about this, and I know we've had this conversation about when people talk about nihilism and they think that it means pointlessness, that they think that that nihilists are dour and I don't believe in anything. No, it means we don't have false beliefs. We don't hold something to be true that isn't evidently true. That also means
it's
that
not
we
the onus
when
of where
when
meaning is.
the one way that I like to summarize it is if you use religion, if you cite religion as your sole reason for any motivation or policy or action or whatever, then you have not given a reason. You have to
Yeah,
come up with something more than that to have a reason at all.
you've given your
And
opt-out
that
reason as to why you're not going to provide any reason. Like I'm not going to give reasoning because this is the thing that I use to hide myself from having to reason things.
exactly. So when they talk about morality, for example, I mean, I can come up with all the reasons behind a nihilistic, atheistic, materialistic, evolutionary morality, and all they have is the threat of eternal punishment by an indomitable despot, which
Existential carrot and stick, a threat beyond death. Something completely unsubstantiated. Oh, you better watch out, because otherwise, when you're dead, something bad will happen, but you'll already be dead. So,
then the excuse that the only reason I don't believe them is so that I want to sin, which makes no damn sense. They can't even define what sin is in a way that makes any sense. I mean,
that's
I had an
projection.
argument with somebody yesterday, that was talking that God is without sin, and I'm like, is God without vanity, jealousy, vengeance, and wrath? Because those are, that's like half of the 7 deadly sins. We could also argue that he's guilty of sloth since he doesn't do a damn thing, right?
Yeah, I remember the thing that I forgot a minute ago. When
Okay.
someone corrects a false position that you hold, that is fundamentally a type of knowledge gaining. Like when you replace a false idea, a false understanding, a false belief, a false position with something that is more accurate and more in correspondence with reality, you have gained knowledge in a way. It is as valuable as being right, like if not more valuable, because in being wrong you are corrected of something that informs other opinions and beliefs, because every understanding that you have connects to every other understanding that you have. And if you're holding false ones, especially if they're foundational and fundamental, then everything above that is corrupted and ruined. And by addressing that and pointing out the flaws in it, you are providing a vast amount of knowledge to people. That's what I forgot. Sorry, I was trying to hold on to that and let you finish your sentence, and then it was like, fuck, I lost it.
I fully understand it. I feel the same when people want to address my position and they think that I have to do a defense mechanism because they have made it, believers have made it their identity that they believe this thing.
Yes.
And while I am famously atheist, I'm on the board of directors for American Atheists and all like this. If you could convince me that there is a God, I mean, that's, you will change about my identity. I'd also be a multimillionaire. I'd be an evangelical, pastor overnight, have millions of dollars. I would, be right up there with all those wackaloons that say that, God kicked their door open and woke them up at noon to tell them, I'm going to do this thing. And, and so all they got to do is profess this fantasy to the other people who want to believe the same fantasy, and then throw in that, and you need to give me $900 million so I can build my temple. And so, and okay,
there's
I'll
a big
just send you the
market.
money. I need another jet. So yeah,
there's a big market.
I need another Cessna
Citation
jet.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when you all these people who claim, like I'm about to do a video on this guy who pretended that he was in hell for 20 minutes. I'm about to do a video on that guy. But all these guys who pretend that they've come from one position. I was a card-carrying devout atheist, as if it's possible to be a devout atheist. All these people who pretend to come from this position, there was this dentist who pretended to be an evolutionary scientist, but it was really he was a dentist. Job Martin wrote a book on the evolution of a creationist, and he talks about how he was a devout atheist. And he was an evolutionist until he discovered the scientific truth, which means he cracked open a Bible and blindly believed all of the fables that he read. That's it. That's all.
Oh my God, he figured it out. He figured it out. Everyone,
exactly.
We figured out life and everything. It was in the book all along.
They use this as a springboard to become famous as evangelicals, right? Yeah. Well, if you really were an atheist and could prove it, you were on the board of directors of American Atheists. You're on
your reasoning is documented.
You've got hundreds of videos promoting atheism, and there's no argument. Yeah, and then you find Jesus. Got some money coming my way.
Yes, then you're manipulating people, or you have a brain tumor, and you better be checked out. Like either because you can understand the position and then pretend to be one of them in order to manipulate them, and some atheists do that when they have absolutely no morals. But sorry,
when you're a believer, and the whole thing is that you have to believe, and if you're going to be damned eternally if you do not believe, right? Because you have required beliefs and prohibited beliefs. Yeah. If you don't believe this, then you're going to be, and you have to believe it in order to believe that you're going to be damned, because we don't have souls. There is no afterlife. There is no heaven or hell. But
Yeah.
and if there was an afterlife that did have souls, then somebody else's religion would probably be more likely true than this. But
Yeah.
if you have such a belief, then you have a motive to lie in defense of that belief, even to lie to yourself. And
If your emotions are invested in it.
faith is all about pretending to know things you don't know, asserting baseless speculation as if it was a matter of fact. Faith is all about lying. That's it, right? If the idea is to improve understanding, you don't want any false information. You certainly don't want to share false information.
Yeah.
Accuracy and accountability are paramount. So in my perspective, if I were to lie in defense of what I prefer to be true,
that would
I'm no better than the believer is.
Yeah,
I have sacrificed everything of value to my position, my worldview, if you will. I have no motivation to lie in defense of my position, whereas the believer definitely does. And that's been a big problem, because I mean, believers always, every day, tell me that I'm a liar. You should mute your microphone when you make noises like that. You should mute your microphone when you do that.
Pardon me. I will. I'll keep my.
But anyway, yeah. So I don't have a reason to lie, but the believers definitely do, and they can't be honest in their position.
And you don't have a reason to be threatened by the truth. Like, you don't have a reason to be threatened by reality. Like, the only reason that they do is because the truth hurts when you've allowed yourself to become emotionally invested in lies. And they've become heavily emotionally invested in lies. So justifying those lies with more lies becomes much more appealing than the emotional turmoil of working through that and detaching your emotions from these beliefs and aligning your beliefs more with actual reality as it's best understood.
Okay. And you sent me a whole bunch of notes
I did.
for what you wanted. Yeah. So I want to give you a moment to just like run through your bullet points. We're 40 minutes into this, and I don't want you to have missed anything.
Okay.
When we get to the top of the hour. All right.
Okay. So, theology. Yes, philosophy uninformed by science is blind, untethered from reality, and rife with speculation and outright fantasy. Whereas science, unguided by honest philosophy, is confused, mere detached data without a framework of interpretation. So the importance of philosophy is that it allows you to better arrange the information that science uncovers in a coherent manner that allows you to form a picture of reality that is more accurate. If you're still in earshot. Just went for a drink. Gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, so my partner's father took academic philosophy. My partner's father is a philosopher because he graduated, so he technically is a philosopher. But he went into that course. He went into that already having been convinced of a philosophical position, being the transcendental meditation cult. If you've ever heard of them, TM.
Yeah, I was into it. Wasn't a cult. There wasn't any kind of organization involved. I mean, I had read the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Yeah.
I had read His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
It's a cult in the definition that like there's a figurehead and they're like he's the holiest and like you're not allowed to question him. And
but you know, as some Wiccans declare themselves to be solitary practitioners, I wasn't following any authoritarian dictate. I was pursuing transcendental meditation itself.
It's still
I was
a form
trying
of
to be
prepackaged philosophy.
I was doing astral projection, and I was following all of the mechanisms, rituals, the meditations for that.
I see. Well, there's definitely a like value to meditation in general, but like there's, from my understanding at least, and from what my partner has told me, there's a lot of pseudo-scientific and like esoteric beliefs that are tied up in the framework of the philosophy there. So he went into philosophy and came out with the exact same adherence to the beliefs that he had beforehand, showing that philosophy academically fails as a means by which to help people work through their beliefs and help people develop critical thinking skills. Whereas like it should be the pinnacle. It should be the pinnacle of all fields. It should be the thing that like takes in all the information from all the other fields and makes giant like realizations click, and is constantly like being like corresponding reality and contacting and collaborating with the other fields in order to advance its position. But unfortunately, it has stagnated for quite a long time, and that is a big reason why, like, you hear the word philosophy and your eyes glaze over. Most people do, because most people who represent it are representing a field that has been stagnating for many, many years, and it's more a history of these ideas than it is a critical thinking skills class, which is what it should ultimately be.
My problem is it's just having seen philosophy so grotesquely misused.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
I mean, if you get into a debate with a Muslim, any Muslim, you're going to see philosophy grotesquely misused and misunderstood.
Yes. Even
by the very people who are
theologians.
criticizing me for my ignorance.
Yeah. Well, speaking of ignorance,
the thing, yeah.
Pardon me.
Go ahead.
So complete ignorance of all things is the default state. I've heard you think of or reaffirm the position of thinking of ignorance as a pejorative, potentially, because it is ignorance. It is what you ignore as well as what you
exactly
what you don't know.
Ignorance,
but complete ignorance of
as
all
a verb,
things.
yeah.
Complete ignorance of all things is the default position that we all start out from. And some people are, those who coast passively in ignorance are naive, whereas those who intentionally steer themselves away from knowledge to preserve their beliefs and that those beliefs that thrive in the shadows of their ignorances, those are the people who are willfully ignorant, and who I think that you're referring to when you would call people of that kind, of that caliber, ignorant. Whereas
because they are ignorant.
Yes,
they're
exactly.
willfully ignoring what they don't want to understand. They don't want to understand what they don't want to believe.
Yes, I was just alluding to the fact that from my position, ignorance is like, I'm ignorant of most things. Like, I don't know most things about most facts about most fields. I'm ignorant of, but like, I want to. I constantly try to learn more things about more things, but I'm still existing in a position of ignorance, but trying to navigate. Like, honest philosophy has helped people navigate away from a position of complete ignorance to a position of less and less ignorance and more comprehension of reality. Whereas bad philosophies make people stagnate in that goal and make people dwell in their ignorance and make people cling to ignorance, because ignorance is a place where they can hide their most treasured beliefs, the god of the gaps.
Here's my problem. If I tell somebody that I don't want to believe what they say simply because they say so,
exactly,
I'm not going to believe that you say something is a fact until I can independently show that it is a fact. Oh, he was right about this thing. Okay, well, once I can show that you were right in your premise, well, now maybe you can lead me to the conclusion. Let's make sure that your premise is correct first. Then I will get accused of verificationism.
How dare you follow through my logic?
Which is a central tenet of what is it? Logical positivism,
which
fell out of favor in the
19th.
It fell out of favor in the 20th century. Okay, well, maybe it did, but I'm not a logical positivist. I'm not. I don't have this basis of verificationism. I just don't want to be fooled by every stupid lie any idiot makes up. Right?
I want to comprehend reality as it is.
Yeah, there's an important distinction there. And besides, what difference does it make if logical positivism fell out of favor in the 20th century when you're citing Aquinas as if he rebuts Hume?
Oh,
I'm sorry. By your logic, right? The 19th century should override the 13th, right?
Absurd. It's very easy to like just hide behind the title of philosopher and then say that I'm an expert on logic and ideas, and then have people group up behind you who don't question your ideas or your reasoning and assume that since you're saying things that they don't quite understand, but you proclaim to know what you're talking about, that you must know what you're talking about, and it must be on them for not, like, oh, it's just on me. I must be too dumb to not understand what they're talking about. It's not that they're talking out of their ass. Like the Maharishi, for example, yes. Well, actually, it translates to enlightened king or something. Like it's a very fluffy title, but it's obfuscation. It's a lot of esoteric obfuscation. It's saying a bunch of stuff without really saying anything at all, and hoping people get like they have a dissonance thing where you're saying something that like you seem confident and sure that you're saying something deep, but I don't get it. So it must be that I just don't understand things, and that I must just default to taking you as a position of authority. Like it's same with like
one of my problems. one of my problems was that I was a big Beatles fan when I was a young teenager. Yeah, and I thought that the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he's one of the people that the Beatles hung out with, like
Yep.
all of them.
Celebrities.
And so he started the school of transcendental meditation.
I'm
Of all
familiar with it.
places, I think it was in Des Moines, Iowa. Of all places, was just a weird place to put that.
Yeah, Fairview.
But here I am thinking that this is an actual wise man. This is somebody who's been to the other side and can go regularly to the other side. It's like when people who say that Australia doesn't exist and then you've been there. Well, here's somebody who's been to the other world and back.
Yeah.
The prime material plane to the ethereal plane, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I saw a video from the Institute of Transcendental Meditation where these guys have folded their legs into the lotus positions and they've got it in a locked position, but they put their legs up, so then now you can lift up and your legs will still be in that. And so they had this inflatable mattress kind of a thing, and these guys are bouncing on that mattress, convinced that they are flying.
Yes.
Flying. I'm like,
Once
okay,
the
so
consciousness of the
faith
world is at the
really
right point, then they will fly. Once the consciousness of the world is elevated enough.
Faith is just lying to yourself. It's just make believe. That's
so
it.
I was
That was a
judged
critical
by my
moment
in-law.
for me. That was a critical moment for me because I was into TM
Yeah.
until I saw that shit, and that was the last straw. I had already interviewed people that I had interviewed people that were more successful in astral projection than I was, but the thing is, I couldn't get any consistency in their accounts.
Yeah, no, just like with Jesus.
And so when I run into people who think that they're fighting dragons, like you believe that you were out of body when you no, that can't be. This is lucid dreaming. That's all that is.
Okay, I have to tangent or before I forget it. My in-law has, mostly for my philosophy, looked down on me for the majority of the time that I've been with my partner, and she's heavy into TM, and I didn't know most of what things about TM, but I knew that like there was a mattress in a part of the house and it was for the TM, but I didn't know what it was for. And then like years later, I'm looking at videos on TM and see them hippity hopping, and it clicked that was what was happening. And it was just such a hilarious moment for me. And you brought it back.
Yeah, and I get the same thing when I watch Faith Healing, for example, when they wheel some guy onto the stage and the guy
criticize you seriously,
hits him in the head.
They take seriously.
Hits him in the head and he stands up. I'm healed, and then he walks off the stage and they give him his $50 or whatever. But the guy didn't show up in a wheelchair. He walked into and they gave him a wheelchair. Yeah.
When it happens with a amputee, then we'll talk. And repeatedly and verifiably.
Exactly. There was a guy who broke his clavicle here in Dallas, and he refused to go to the emergency room because he was going to go to the Reverend Bobby Tilton, who's this huge evangelical minister. He was one of the first really super stupid rich mega pastors in the Dallas area. The guy goes to be healed by Bobby Tilton. Tilton put his hand on his clavicle, clapped it on his clavicle, and like yelled at him to be healed. And move your arm. And the guy it's on video. It's beautiful.
I think I saw that in one of your videos where he moves it.
He's wincing from the pain.
Yeah, sometimes no amount of belief gets you there. Sometimes you can't placebo your way out of an injury or an illness for a little while.
Indeed. And so James Randi was talking. He told me, and I know he's told this publicly, but James Randi was talking about this story where he had gone to Peter Popov. Had one of his things where he had people throwing their medication up on the stage because they didn't need it anymore.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that. Like all the.
So Randy found one of the people that was in the congregation who had thrown their medication up on the stage, and it's a week later or so, and so he goes to go meet this woman to and he wants to interview her. How are you doing now that you've given up your medication? And as he showed up to her house, they were wheeling her body out on a.
Oh my! What a coincidence!
Yeah.
Damn. Sometimes you get coincidences like that. That's insane. Yeah. Well, I guess it was her time.
Oh yeah. Well, it's got to be some stupid bullshit excuse, doesn't it?
Okay, so
and it doesn't really matter. It's all belief in God, faith, all of it is you don't like reality. You want to pretend
You
something
want a
else.
simplification.
Something.
You want a simplification, something that's easy to think about so you don't have to comprehend the complexity of reality.
Oh, and it's also got to make you more important than you are.
And comfortable and less
So
afraid.
somehow I'm arrogant for
For
not
thinking you're
believing
not
in
the
God.
center of the universe.
Yeah.
For thinking
For
it wasn't
thinking
made
I'm
for
not the
you.
reason that the universe exists.
So I'm an
The
atheist
universe was
also.
Yep.
Pardon. I define it as like essentially just seeing the God explanation as a bad hypothesis for the existence of anything. Like it's just a bad hypothesis and there's no good reasoning for it. I've never heard an argument for the existence of God that has like convinced me. That's essentially why I'm an atheist, because no argument for God is without many flaws, and like it doesn't answer more questions than it asks. Like it's a supposed answer that asks way more questions than it answers and leads to infinite regress, for instance. But
what you get if you ask somebody for, show me, give me reason to believe that God exists, you'll never get evidence.
no,
You'll get arguments, and the only arguments that you get are philosophical arguments wherein the
terrible ones,
premises
terrible
wherein
ones.
the premises are at
Assume
least
the
one of
conclusions.
them is false, usually more than one of them is false, and they lead to a non sequitur. The conclusion is
And they
non
don't follow
sequitur.
each other. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
insanity.
So they don't make any sense at all. There was a handful of Muslims that tried to corner me once and trying to get me to admit to a necessary being, which they misdefined, by the way. So when they're describing this, they're describing just anything that existed at the beginning of the universe, or before the beginning of the universe, or anything that is eternal, whatever. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they're going to call a necessary being. So they're not even going to give me a proper definition of it.
yeah.
So
Something
I'd say,
slippery that they can get away with.
so I realized where they were going to try to head with this, because word games is all they have. So I said, okay, material energy, first law of thermodynamics, cannot be created or destroyed. So if material exists, dead, unconscious material, somehow translated as their immaterial living God. So
You're not supposed to think about it, Aaron. You're not supposed to think these things through. That's how they get. That's how the ideas are maintained within their heads.
but
Like
I
that's
knew
why
they
they
were
don't
going to
work
do
in
that
your
when I
heads.
did it. It's just it's stupid word games. That's the best they got.
A funny side note about the God thing. While we're addressing the things in the notes, the any and all consistent definitions of the God concept are arguments for an advanced alien creator being. Like every single, like if you can define the concept of a God consistently, then you're arguing for a God create like a existence. Sorry, pardon, an alien existence engineer, biological engineer being either elsewhere within this universe or outside of this universe in the objective infinitum that controls the metrics of this universe somehow. But anything that you are arguing for is not some sort of magical, like there's no definition that you can provide consistently for anything quote unquote magical. Like it doesn't work. The only thing that they are arguing for is a creator
Supernatural.
alien. Yes,
The
like there's no
supernatural is the
supernatural.
magical.
Exactly. There is no such thing as supernatural. So any definition you're providing for a god, you're automatically defining an alien into existence, which leads to the exact same infinite regress problem that comes with proposing a god's existence. Because like, oh, if God exists, then who made God, and who made God, and who made God? But if we were made by alien engineers, then who engineered the engineers, and who engineered the engineers? And eventually you get to the question, or the realization rather, that eventually one of these beings was forged from the chaos, from the patterns of the chaos. And then you can just like consult this reality and look around us and realize that that's us, that we're the first in the line of creator beings.
The biggest problem that I have with believers is when all religious belief is a denial of reality to some degree, but some of them just deny all of it.
Yeah.
And if I
Solipsism.
don't have a reason, I will not debate idealists who believe that everything is an illusion.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have any commonality at all, not even a basic fact at all,
Yeah.
then
you won't get anywhere.
there's not even a point to start from. And they want to imagine that we are figments of somebody else's imagination. That there's, even in the Matrix, there was at least a reality at some point at some time.
There must be,
But
because otherwise you have the infinite regress.
but in the mind of idealists, very often there is not.
Because they don't
talked to
think through
people
the implications of their beliefs. They just hold their beliefs in static, not thinking or not realizing the fact that if you hold a belief or if you think something's true, you also have to reason through the implications of that. And like you can't just hold something as true in a vacuum.
So my argument is, if we know how vision works, how photons work, how our rods and our cones in our eyes work, if we know that our olfactory senses, how we're picking up molecules of this or that and detecting what they are, but you don't believe that molecules exist. You don't believe that photons exist. You don't believe that there can be vibrations in the atmosphere because you don't believe there's an atmosphere, because you don't believe in atoms. Then your God has created these very intricate and consistent explanations that we can base all our medicine on.
Yeah.
And yet none of it is real. Your God created the illusion of an illusion because he's a liar.
Either way, there would have to be an objective framework. They're just essentially arguing that God is a programmer and we're in a simulation, and subjectivities are the only things that exist. Like consciousnesses are the only things that exist, and there's no objective framework in which they emerge. We're like little programmed islands. Like they're essentially just arguing for a programmer God at that point, instead of realizing that subjects cannot emerge without an objective framework that allows for them to do so. Which we can actually segue from that into the what's known as the anthropic principle. You know how the why is there something rather than nothing and creation implies a creation arguments are so popular?
But yeah, whenever I hear that creation requires a creator, I say, well, you're assuming it's a creation, which of course it isn't. It's a
Yes.
reality, and reality doesn't require a realtor.
Yeah. There you go.
So what is your, and mind you, we've been on an hour, and I don't want to go much over that. So I'm going to ask you to get out all your final points and close it up.
All right. I suppose I will try. So
I don't want you to miss anything, but I do want to.
Yes.
You know.
I get it. Okay. So what is important to address for those points is something known as the anthropic principle, but I've come to refer to it as the anthropic razor, and it's something that's often misrepresented and you might have encountered before. But from my perspective, it is essentially the reality that the only universe that can ever be observed is one that is capable of producing observers. So the question of like, why am I here experiencing a reality? Because if you weren't, if this wasn't a reality that couldn't emerge something like you couldn't perceive it at all. So it's very simple, but at the same time very profound, because it's essentially a philosophical razor. It slices through the entirety of the what is it, the ontological argument, like fine tuning, like claiming that like, oh, it had to be exactly this. Well, yeah, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't know it. Like you didn't know it 100 years ago when you weren't alive, and you won't know it 100 years from now when you don't exist. And Mars doesn't know that it's Mars. It's just objective nothing. Like it's only when the universe wraps itself in and the right patterns emerge for subjectivities to emerge that they can be like, holy shit, what the fuck, I exist? What? But like that is an existence bias. It's almost an existence bias. It's a bias inherent to existing at all.
There's a quote from a nihilist. Holy fuck, I exist.
Holy fuck, I exist. Okay, speed run.
Right, continue, please.
The concept of intersubjectivity is important in relation to nihilism, because it's essentially the aspects of our subjectivities that are similar. You and I, for instance, have there's a huge correlation between shared intersubjectivity and genetic / anatomical similarity, even cultural similarity, like the beliefs that we hold or like the photic sneeze response. Some people look at the sun and they sneeze, like that will determine a degree of intersubjective similarity that we have. A big one being the language that I'm using right now. The fact that I can have packets of meaning in my own mind communicated across the void using aspects of objective reality, like the fact that there's fluctuating pressure waves right now and communicating information from my subjectivity to your subjectivity through the objective. So essentially that's like, once you understand the reality of nihilism, the implications spiral in this direction. And speaking of intersubjectivity, science is a method by which subjects intersubjectively verify what is most likely true of objective reality, independent of subjective opinion or interpretation. So if I want to figure out what the fuck anything is, independent of what I might believe about it or what my particular isolated hallucination machine is generating, then a method like science becomes essential to figure out what is true of objective reality, independent of anything that you or I must think about it. So that's the epistemic value of science within this framework.
Okay. Are there any other notes that you wanted to go
There
over?
are a couple.
Okay,
Yeah, the
let's
value.
let's let's get them all out. I don't want to contest or add to anything because we've been over an hour. But go ahead.
Okay. Not only were the authors of the world's holy books ignorant of most of reality, but they had no consistent means by which to consistently and reliably navigate away from that ignorance, like a method like science. Uh,
What do you mean
in
the
fact,
authors? I mean the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, the Quran, the Book of Mormon. They were all written by God. I've been told so.
oh yeah, that's why it's on parchment paper and ink. That's why it's not like an obelisk like 2001, something that we'd have to like get to a certain point of intelligence to comprehend. No, no, no. That's why it's like paper and ink, like all of our other writings. It all makes sense.
And that's why all the religions are completely different in all their doctrine.
Okay, so consistent and methodological reasoning was and still is avidly opposed whenever it does rise up in significant ways, because as we both know, the truth hurts when you become emotionally invested in lies. So reasoning was selected against because most people want to preserve the things that they want to believe in. And in the past, it was much easier to kill non-believers. And we didn't have like nations that allow people to have differing beliefs under the same constitution. So it was much less likely for people with differing beliefs to come to be a thing that could actually like spread their word to other people and like form communication bonds and organizations and whatnot. Okay. Yeah, changing one's beliefs is a massive neurological undertaking. Resisting this process of mental restructuring is in large part the basis of a lot of reality denial, of a lot of belief preservation, because all fallacies, biases, and rationalizations are symptoms born of the endeavor to resist the biological, neurological, and psychological costs of changing one's mind. So it's literally a neurological thing. The basis of learning something, like learning to play guitar, is literally neurological restructuring your brain. So if you have a very profound foundational belief that a lot of neurology is wrapped up around, in order to challenge and change that belief would be a huge psychological undertaking. It's much more effort than most people are willing to put in. And in fact, it's much more easy to lie to defend your belief than it is to uproot foundational false belief.
I've had this discussion before, but it would probably be worth having again just to focus on this one point.
Yeah,
The notion that your consciousness could be taken from your body and placed into somebody else's body, or
that would fundamentally not be you anymore.
exist independent of a body. But more importantly, to be even if your consciousness of your adult self could be, or your aged self could be, the old slave. If I knew then what I know now, just imagine that, right?
Yeah,
Somebody my age goes back to some 18-year-old kid and to wake up one morning and now
yeah.
you get to live your life over again, right?
But you'd be killing that
All
version
of
of you. You'd be overriding him. But anyway,
but it's not possible to do that.
yeah,
It's not possible to take this mind and put it in 18-year-old me.
because your mind
One,
is literally and physically defined by the neurological structures within your head and the patterns they take.
exactly. So not only, but you've got until you're 25, 26 before your brain is even fully developed. So you've gone beyond the point where your brain is fully developed. If you were to try to find some way to backdoor or find a loophole to get my consciousness into 18-year-old me, the things that I do, as far as motor function memory, whatever skills you may have, you can play guitar or whatever, you go back to your
Yeah,
18, and those you're a kung fu professional, whatever,
yeah, yeah.
whatever skills you have, hand-eye coordination, whatever, they don't exist before you
Yes.
develop those
Or the
synapses,
memories you had, the experiences you had. Yeah.
physical connections
Yes.
that you've built don't exist
Yes. It's not
before
an
you started.
ephemeral thing. It's literally defined by the physical structures within your head,
Exactly.
which is an aspect of comprehending the quote unquote materialism of consciousness that is fascinating, because you realize that every thought has a neurological correspondence, and the process of like changing a bad habit or learning something new is literally about structuring the patterns of neurons in your brain, which is fascinating because
If it
it
were
becomes
possible,
easier to fire the more you do it, and it fires more on its own, and it becomes harder to change the more you do it, which is why unlearning is so difficult and learning new things is so difficult.
and even if it was possible somehow to take your mind and put it into somebody else's body.
It wouldn't be you anymore.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah. Like
Because you're still based on that animal or that person, whoever it is, that
yes,
now has your consciousness inside them. They can still play guitar if they could before. They can,
yes,
they can still play piano, or they still have their skills. They still have their kung fu practice, whatever
yeah,
that you never possessed,
yeah,
because
yeah.
they have those physical connections within their brain.
Yes, and in
And
order
they
to even think like you, they wouldn't be them anymore, and you wouldn't be you anymore. You'd have to rewire everything, and it would just be amalgamation of the two. It wouldn't make sense. There's no consistent way that you could put it. Just any body swapping.
So the idea that you survive the death of your body
Is
and
rejecting the
you
fact that you are based in this. You are a result of these patterns emerging now. Like if these patterns weren't emerging now in this way, or in fact, what happens all the time when people get brain injuries, their literal personality and conscious experience changes because this is the consciousness machine. This is the subjectivities are as though islands within the objective infinitum. We are localized centers where reality has looped in on itself and become aware of itself, and only in those localized little pockets can this phenomena be generated. It's not something that just exists exterior to it.
but you're talking about objective reality. I'd much rather pretend that I had magic powers and that I was best friends with the most powerful genie imaginable.
Yeah, why can't you just let people believe whatever they want to believe? Like that's how it should be. Just don't challenge each other's belief, and let's just all hold delusions and never correct anything. All right.
Exactly. Do you have any more to complete in your notes?
No, no, I think that's it. I think
Okay.
I'm ready for us to wrap it up. Uh,
All right. Well,
yeah,
that was a fun cover. Much more fun than the last conversation we had.
yeah, no,
Uh,
definitely.
so it can be, being nihilist doesn't mean that you're depressed. It doesn't mean you're saying, oh, what's the point?
It just puts things into context. It puts the onus of meaning on us. We are the meaning makers. We are the ones who must reason towards meaning. We must invent it and we must create it ourselves. And that is a burden and a responsibility, but it is also freeing because it only ever
and
was us.
and I'll tell you from a lifetime of experience that it does not inhibit your ability to appreciate. All right.
Thanks for having
Thank
me
you
on,
very
Owen.
much.